Hello, everyone, and welcome to Diversity and Inclusion in Hospitality Panels. And I am Christine Her, and from California State University, Sacramento, and I will be moderating these sessions. And let me first share my screen with you to look at how the panel sessions will be operated. So first, I'm going to give you a brief introduction about our panelists. And also, then we are going to have the discussions about the 6 items in the agendas for the diversity and inclusion in hospitality. And then later, we are going to have about 15 minutes Q&A sessions. And dear the attendees, you cannot speak. So please type your questions in Q&A or chat box during the sessions. So let me introduce our panelists. Let me stop share so you will see our panelist, the face. I'm gonna start first with who Sonya Bradley is. So Sonya Bradley is the Chief of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Visit Sacramento. And she is a 25-year veteran of the tourism industry and has created a better path forward for people of color and other underrepresented people in her community to be part of Sacramento's tourism industry. And also, she continues to explore with peers around the country how tourism organizations can better incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion into daily operations. Let's welcome Sonya. Thank you, Sonya.
Hello.
Then next, our panelist is Alyssa Dronenburg, Talent and Culture Manager at Madeline Hotel and Residence, Auberge Resort Collection in Colorado. Before joining Madeline Hotel, Alyssa oversaw the mass hiring of nearly 2,000 seasonal workers for SeaWorld. Alyssa worked closely with local disadvantaged youth, veterans organizations, and developed a special partnership to employ youth in and aging out of the foster care system. Let's welcome Alyssa.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you for joining. And our last panelist is Dr. Eric D. Olson. And he is the recipient of 2022 West Federation CHRIE Excellence in Diversity and Inclusion Award in Senior Academic Track. And Dr. Olson is a department chair and associate professor at Rita Navin Dimond Department of Hotel Management, School of Hospitality at Metropolitan State University of Denver. His research focuses on the experiences of the LGBTQ+ tourist, event attendee, consumer, as well as event sustainability. Let's welcome Dr. Olson.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us today again, and let's open for our discussion. Our first questions to discuss is, I'm going to share my screen. Our first question is this. What is diversity and inclusion? How to define it in your area? So we heard of many times recently about what diversity and inclusion is. So we are wondering, but we are not sure what it exactly is. So could you share with us how the term is interpreted and understood in your area so that our students, faculty, and industry practitioners attended today can have a better understanding of what diversity and inclusion is? Sonya, could you go first?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thank you, Christine, for having me. DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, that's the simplest way, I guess, is I think most people understand, is looking at everything from race, ethnicity, culture, backgrounds, and even education to some extent. Something that just, diversity for us would be just having people who represent, different spheres of our country, of the cultures that's within particularly within your region. I know for us, and inclusion falls along those lines as well. How are you able to open opportunities to include more people into what I call the tourism ecosystem and hospitality ecosystem, if you will. But as a destination marketing organization, one of the things that we're looking at, because what we do is we bring conventions, meetings, and tourism to Sacramento, because quite frankly, it's an economic benefit, right? It's an economic engine for our destination. And sometimes that's just, it becomes only for a small group of in the community. So as part of our DEI efforts, we really want to expand the opportunities for more people in our community to experience and benefit from tourism. And for us, it means going outside our downtown core, because that's where our convention center and most of the hotels are, but being able to bring in more neighborhoods and community, and also allows us to tell a fuller story of Sacramento, and not just give sort of a surface story on Sacramento. So one of the ways that we're looking at, in addition to ensuring that our own organization is diverse, but also ensuring that there are people in the community who may not have had the chance to, again, benefit from tourism, that we're reaching out to them in a very proactive way to what we call bring them under the tourism umbrella, and honestly reap the economic benefits of visitation to our region.
Thank you, Sonya. Alyssa?
Thank you again. So I think Sonya explained it beautifully, but just to kind of add a little bit more, diversity to me means more about the representation of the organization, and then inclusion would be how well contributions, presence, perspective of your organization are taken in. So that's how we look at it. I think a little bit opposite of Sonya, our hotels are in pretty remote locations. I'm currently in Telluride. We have 25 hotels open right now across the US and in Mexico. And I think what our goal with Auberge is, we want not only our community to be represented, but we also want to bring in new perspectives and new visions into these areas that are pretty remote, that our workforce in Telluride, majority of our workforce is about an hour away, hour and a half away. So how can we give them access and give them opportunities? And in these beautiful places, but making sure we have opportunity for growth with team members as well. So that's what it means to us here at Auberge.
Thank you, Alyssa. And Dr. Olson?
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, it's good to see everyone, and thanks for inviting me on this panel. I'm going to agree with all the definitions that my fellow panelists had stated. I would also add that I think diversity is often, kind of a composition in terms of who's present. For our researchers in the audience, I almost think of a demographic table, in that, when you look at the demographic table, all the various different dimensions that can be kind of quantified. But I want to recognize that I think it's important that often when we look at diversity, it could be the visible traits or characteristics of a community, and then also invisible traits of an individual as well. So I think that's one additional element I'd like to add. And then from inclusion, I think from a student perspective, I'll bring in kind of an educational viewpoint. It's who is included. Do our students, and also add faculty and staff members and graduate students and other stakeholders, do their identities, are their identities affirmed in a department or in a college or in a university or in a community? And I'll also add on there, are they welcome? Do they feel welcome when they set foot onto campus or in a virtual environment as well? And do they belong? A sense of belonging, I think, is important in inclusion. So those are a couple other additional elements I would add for our opening question.
Thank you all. So we have the panelists from each different area. So Sonya is from the tourism and the board, and then Alyssa is from the hospitality business and hotel business, and then Eric from the education. So it's good to have this a little bit different perspective on the diversity and inclusion. Then our next question is about, so let me share my screen here. Why is diversity and inclusion important in hospitality and tourism industry and education? So the question is, why particularly for the hospitality and tourism industry and education, the diversity and inclusion matters? What differentiates our industry from other industry in terms of diversity and inclusion? So, Alyssa, do you mind that you go first?
Of course, I'd be happy to. I think what we're trying to do specifically at Auberge is we have these beautiful locations and we want to represent the communities there. I opened our property in Hawaii and that opened up 600 job opportunities, and we wanted that to represent the community, but also bring in people that had different perspective and different viewpoints, which I think is super important. So I think that's the element that's really important is, especially for hospitality, we have people from all over the world come to our hotels and we want them to feel comfortable and welcome. And we want our staff to represent that too. And so that's super important to us and why it's important in our hotels and in tourism.
Thank you, Alyssa. And Dr. Olson?
Yeah, Alyssa, I really like that idea of the hospitality welcomes people from all over the world. That's so true. I mean, our industry is so unique. We are literally in every country, every city, every geographical location in the world. I think for a lot of us, that's why we're part of this industry. That's very fun and exciting and interesting, right? A couple things, from an educational perspective, I do think that diversity and inclusion is important for the educational realm because I think it enriches the educational experience. I think some of the best moments of education I've had as an instructor and as a student are from learning from others. Is from learning that from others that have a different background from myself or a different story to share. I've always found that fascinating and fantastic. And then lastly, I would add, from the educational lens, I think for our students, visibility matters. So in terms of a diverse staff and faculty and educational environment, I think representation really does matter for our students.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. And Sonya?
Yeah, I love that, how I wrote that down. Visibility matters, representation matters so much. And one of the things I just wanted to, one of the areas that for sure is that, it improves the experience for visitors. If you can go to a destination that gives you, again, what I call that fuller story of what there is to do there, honestly, what there is to eat there. I had the opportunity yesterday to visit an area. We have a little Saigon area here in Sacramento, and it's just a couple of blocks, but I quite frankly ate my way through this area. But it was great to getting to know those cultures, and honestly, hearing the stories made everything so much better. So that's why we believe it's important, and to our industries. And to your point, that's one of the reasons we love what we do. Someone once, I've heard, you can't export tourism or hospitality for jobs, right? They have to be here. And in doing so, I think it's incumbent upon us to give visitors an experience they can't get elsewhere, right? Every city, every destination is different. Every hotel is different. And so you bring your unique self to these, you get the uniqueness of those destinations. An overused word, quite frankly, is authenticity. But if you can get an authentic experience at a destination, then you walk away so much more fulfilled and enriched, and I think it just exposes people to another side, and I think that's just important in life. So I believe that's why it's so important for us.
Thank you, Sonya, for your great insight. And then our next question is related with these questions, actually. What are the benefits of diversity and inclusion in the workplace and education? So this question is a kind of the extension of the prior questions, but what could be the tangible or intangible outcomes and benefits when promoting the diversity and inclusions. So Dr. Olson?
Sure, yeah, happy to share some thoughts on that great question. One of my first jobs after undergraduate education was for working for the Walt Disney World Resort down in Orlando, Florida. And going back to Alyssa's earlier comments that Disney and hospitality welcomes guests from all over the world, there's a phrase, and I've always that was kind of brought to my attention and shared with us all the time, that we draw creativity from diversity. And I love that phrase. And we try to use that, I think, a lot in our industry. Anytime we have challenges, workforce challenges as relates to sustainability, protocols in the last couple of years, it takes a team to solve problems. And it takes teams made up of individuals with a wide variety of backgrounds and stories and experiences. So I think that's really important. Another benefit, I think, from the educational realm is, and we see a lot of academic literature in this area, that folks part of the Gen Y and Gen Z cohort, they're expecting companies, hospitality firms, destinations, and I would even add educational elements, educational institutions, to be upfront about their values on what the organization stands for, and they'll support those organizations that have their values, and not only their values listed, but their values implemented, on a day-to-day basis. So those are a couple of thoughts that I had kind of relating to this idea of, the extension of the previous question of benefits.
Thank you, Olson. And
that's all very good points. Draw creativity from diversity. I love that. But, one of the things that we're a destination marketing organization, and so marketing being a big keyword for what we do, particularly around sales and marketing. And when we are out promoting our destination, if everyone on your team has the same experience and viewpoint and background, then guess what? I think the product that we output all starts to look the same. And the fact is, I think every industry and organization have went through a reckoning a few years ago, and we did the same thing, and we knew where we needed to diversify an area so that we could not just refresh, but show again a better picture of our destination that's really very diverse. In fact, in 2020, I think it was U.S. News and World Report called Sacramento the third most diverse big city in the U.S., 300,000 or more population. And when our marketing and our sales tactics don't represent that, at the end of the day, it can hurt the bottom line. And so, by ensuring that your workplace, and when we say workplace, we mean the employees can bring some different backgrounds, and that's everything from age to gender identity to abilities. It just makes what we're putting out there so much, just makes it better. And again, we give visibility, and honestly, we should get more business off that as well.
Thank you, Sonya. And Alyssa?
Yeah, just to add on top of it, I think you both hit on it, but I think we have an enriched value system, and one of the letters stands for curiosity. So I think it's that idea of creativity, curiosity, bringing people together from different backgrounds to get the most out of each other and bring in new ideas. Our hotel company is still very young, still very new. And each time we open a hotel, that's a new general manager, a new director of food and beverage. So we want those people to kind of breed within the company and grow and bring those new ideas. And I think diversity brings that, different backgrounds, different set. And I think, Sonya kind of touched on it. I'm in recruiting. I also think it helps on that point. People want to feel comfortable. They want to work in a diverse environment. And if you get there and everyone looks the same and answers questions the same, they feel like a robot. They don't feel like a human being. So we want everyone to have their voice and feel comfortable. And that's why we had them join the team, because we want them to be their individual self too.
Thank you, Alyssa. And then our next question is about how to create diverse and inclusive working and learning environments. And please share your experience and initiative. So now we think we understand what diverse and the diversity and inclusion is. And then the next question is how to promote it. And I believe you have developed and practiced the strategies and then initiatives. So could you please share your experience? So Sonya.
Sure.
Yeah,
I will tell you, it will always be a work in progress. It's a work in progress now, but I think one of the first things we did really was start conversations. We've never had the conversations within our organizations or really in the tourism industry as well. It became a bigger part of that. The other thing too is training, that you can't rely on. You can't just rely on like sort of what you hope or what your background thinks it is. Think to do around diversity and inclusion, and certainly just showing transparency as much as as possible, or just to be transparent about it. But all that, I think all that harkens back to starting to have the conversation and be consistent with it as well.
Thank you, Sonya. And Alyssa?
Yeah, I think Sonya hit it. Training's super important. That's something that we try to do yearly with current staff and new staff to make sure we're hitting that. I think offering educational development, tuition reimbursement programs, I think always is a great opportunity to help people kind of promote within, diversify there. We really looked at currently recruitment is kind of our focus on how we're doing diversifying right now. So looking at different colleges we can partner with, even local high schools, maybe it's communities around here. In my experience in San Diego, we partnered with military organizations where they already had, skilled labor degrees from the military, and it translated over into the theme park world really well. So getting creative on the recruitment front to find some of these organizations that are in town or in your local community, I think is a great opportunity. And then I think, we really try to focus on developing these partnerships and helping people grow and develop within the organization. So we're investing in them and wanting to grow too.
Thank you, Alyssa. And Dr. Olson?
Sure. For this question, I have a couple ideas in kind of the teaching in the classroom environment, because I know we have a lot of educators in the audience, and I think some of these ideas could really be applicable for training in a workforce environment as well. I do think it starts on day one of the classroom, and if not prep work before. I'm a strong advocate of working with students to create like rules of engagement or values of a class. The first couple of classes to really start having that conversation. What does this class look like? How do we respect each other? How do we interact with each other? And the same thing can be done in an online environment as well. I'm also seeing a lot of instructors add DEI statements in course syllabi. And I think that's a really interesting way to kind of showcase, once again, elements related to DEI in the actual classroom. And then another recent area that I think is kind of a lot of folks are engaging in is just classroom readings. I think traditionally an instructor would select a textbook, and that's a textbook we use all semester. And so I think we're seeing a lot of instructors that are experimenting in looking at the different readings in an actual classroom and pulling from a wide variety of different perspectives, different authors, different viewpoints, readings from different geographical locations. We do know that a lot of the publishing world and a lot of research, is often done on Western culture. So kind of expanding upon that into various readings and guest speakers from around the world. I think that's a very exciting. So those are some of the initial thoughts I have on kind of teaching and how to kind of create that more diverse and welcoming environment in the classroom.
Christine, can I just, you reminded me of something, Eric. It's to do this, you're talking about top down as well. It has to come from senior level. And one of the things I know our industry started was to create at least a a template on how to help diversify our board of directors. That has been, that has plagued a lot of our industry, just not having the same, quite frankly, just the same background. And for us, it's often been primarily general managers of hotels, which is great, but it's not a particularly diverse bunch. And as we expand the work that we're doing, it's important that that group, because that shows your staff that you're serious about diversity and inclusion. I think that's really important.
Absolutely, Sonya. I agree with you 110%. I know at MSU Denver, we just went through a strategic planning process, and one of our 5 pillars of our strategic plan is devoted to DEI efforts. So I agree with you. I think that a lot of those conversations do have to start, from the top and with a collaborative viewpoint, such as designing a strategic plan for a university or another organization. And then you also brought up a really interesting about boards. I know many of us at our programs, our curriculum departments, we have advisory boards or councils that provide, curriculum updates and technology updates. And I think that's another opportunity for us in the hospitality industry to look at the composition of the makeup of our advisory boards.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your insight, and it's really good to know. And there is moving toward the diversity and the inclusions. So our next question is about any challenges that you experienced in preparing and practicing those the diversity and inclusion initiative. So please share if you experienced any challenges, or if you think any potential challenges or some hurdles for doing the diversity and inclusion strategies or practices. So Alyssa, would you mind you go first?
Yeah, no problem. I think, for us personally in hospitality, and I kind of touched on it earlier, I think especially our hotels, because they're so remote, it is access. So making sure, I think that's the biggest challenge for us, is these communities we live in, the average home is 1.2 million. The people that are, to have a diverse workforce, we need to look at how to get people there and how to get affordable housing, how to get people from all areas to the small community that the closest main city is an hour and a half away. So, and that's majority of the resorts that we work with. They're not easy to get to. They don't have a large population 20, 30 minutes away. They're kind of farther from the city. So I think the biggest challenge for us for diversity and inclusion is access.
Thank you. And Dr. Olson?
Sure. I think at the university setting, I think the more common challenges of any new program or initiative, it's time, money, and support. I think that's, pretty much cut across the board, pretty much with any organization. But I think, one of the best ways to overcome some of those challenges is it's a lot of work and it's a lot of effort, but it's those individual one-on-one conversations with faculty, staff, students, and other stakeholders. So I think that's kind of my biggest piece of advice for kind of moving, some of these initiatives forward. It's those one-on-one conversations on an individual level.
Thank you, Olson. And Sonya?
I think it's, one is lack of interest. I think that is a challenge for us. But I'm also reminded that too, as we are all in the hospitality industry in different ways, I think we have believed that we're always a welcoming bunch, right? Why are we even having the conversation? Is this legit? Like, we're hospitality, we welcome everyone, we're happy with everyone. And there may be definitely some truth to that, but I think the ignorance is a big part of it as well. And being able to address that, because what we've found, and I would suspect it's the same in the hotel industry and perhaps even in education, is that at the lower levels, you will see diversity. The more you move up, it becomes less and less diverse. And a lot of that has to do with what we're finding out or learning is there's not perhaps enough mentorship. There's not people that look like them. And so being able to keep people in the pipeline and help move them up continues, helps diversify them. So if it all looks the same going up, you don't see that there's an issue. And I think not being just unaware and ignorant, and we're all ignorant of something, but once you're made aware of it, if you need to do something, and that's also a bigger problem. That could be a problem if someone doesn't want to do anything about what they're seeing in their organization.
Christine, can I add something just off of that? I think just kind of combining Eric and Sonya, especially in the hotel world, it becomes, do they want to do something versus cost of business? And I think it's those 2 points that you guys just made of, is it ignorance, or they don't want to spend the money or invest in to get that long-term return? So I think that's a challenge we face too.
Thank you for sharing. And before I go for the last questions, please attendees, if you have questions and anything, please put your thought on this question on the board, that is our chat box or the Q&A, so that we can talk about that and discuss. And our next questions and last assigned question is, so we talked about the definitions and then why that is important, and then any example of the practices and the challenges. And for the in conclusions, if you can list 3 keywords that you'd like to emphasize on understanding and promoting diversity and inclusion in hospitality. So if you have 3 keywords that will address the inclusion and diversity, and could you please?
Go ahead. I'll go. I had values, community, and opportunity were the 3 keywords I picked.
Could you add why you think that that's the 3 keywords?
Yes, I had values just because you have that should be a value in your organization, and people who are looking for a place of employment, a career, I think would want to see that that's part of your values, that is stated out loud. Community, because for us as a destination, the community is integral to us being successful and us reaching out to them and engaging with the community. And then opportunity, I just, as part of, if we're going to, if we're gonna, walk the walk, then we have to be able to find ways to give opportunity to more people to benefit from the tourism industry. As I stated early on, that's a big part of what we are trying to do as well. So that's how I picked those 3 words.
Thank you, Sonya.
Sure.
And Dr. Olson?
Sure. My 3 words were awareness, creativity, and inspiration. And, I selected those words. I think awareness, having the level of awareness of these various discussions and aspects, and having those conversations with individuals, I think it is very important. Creativity, again, I stated a little earlier, one of my phrases I greatly enjoy is drawing creativity from diversity in terms of kind of solving challenges and problems. And I also add inspiration. I'm always inspired by discussions, such as panels like this. And I think it's important to, small little incremental steps, adding DEI value statement in a course syllabus next semester, or talking about the class on the first day about some of the key values of the class. I think those little incremental steps are very important as well.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. Then Alyssa?
I had education. I think, from a company standpoint, we need to keep educating ourselves as well as promoting education. I think deliberate effort. We need to make a choice to make this a priority. So making sure we're putting in the effort. And lastly, I had creativity. So Eric stole mine, but I'll change it to curiosity. So I think we need to be curious and keep growing our interest, keep finding new ways to implement this, creative ways, interactive ways to get my team members involved, to get our company involved across the world, so people invest in this. So I think those are the 3.
Thank you. So we've done with our 6 agendas, and then, yes, we have the Q&A, and we have the question from the Betty Bassell. And going back to question 5, what is the biggest challenges of diversity going up the ladder from housekeeper to general managers? I find it that language is the biggest. So our question 5 is about challenges. And then challenges that you experience in preparing and practicing the initiative. And question is about what can be the biggest challenge of the diversity going up the ladder from the housekeeper to general managers in the business settings. So the Alyssa or Sonya and Dr. Olson.
I can jump in. I can jump in on this. I mean, I think there's a lot of challenges within that provision outside of diversity. But I think Sonya touched on this. I think it's visibility. We need to make sure that someone who starts as a housekeeper that turns into a general manager, that story needs to be told and it needs to be vocalized. So people think they can do it, they see they can do it and grow towards that. But I mean, the huge challenge is going to be it's a totally different role. So kind of working through, all making sure we're sharing with our team members all the steps it takes to move up that ladder to grow into that position. But I would go back to the biggest challenge is going to be access to all the resources that somebody maybe doesn't have, and then visibility.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything, Sonya and Dr. Olson?
I would say the person was asked specifically about language. I'm presuming perhaps not having strong English skills. I'm assuming that's what I think that's what you're referring to. I think if an employee, and again, this is different because I don't own or run the property, but one to Alyssa's point, is seeing people who have made that leap or made that progression is really, really important. That's a big part of it, because what happens is people sort of drop out or they don't try anymore. But I also think if that person is a valuable employee, then you invest in helping with the language, getting over the language barrier. Having that second language, by the way, is incredibly valuable as well. So that's sort of my take on it. But I think really what Alyssa said is really having people that look like them who have done that, for them to be able to talk to and get advice from, is really important as well.
Thank you, Sonya. Right, and then our next question, what I have from our attendee is from the Seya An. Thank you all for your wonderful answer and thoughts. You all mentioned this already. I agree that diversity and inclusion are a significant new concept from 10 years ago. I might be wrong about the number 10 years, but I am sure that we all agree that diversity and inclusion have been a new trendy topic for the past decade. Before 10 years ago, did the hospitality and tourism industry ever talk about it? In what ways and in what terms did we use at that time? And do you see the differences between now and 10 years ago among your employees at work, or students or faculty, on how they perceive diversity and inclusion? Yeah, so it has 3 questions. So in 10 years ago, have we talked about it? In what way? And any differences between that time and now? And do you see any differences in your employees at work or students about 10 years ago and now compared about the diversity and inclusion?
I would say 10 years ago, especially in our industry, it was called multiculturalism, and every DMO, destination marketing organization, was bringing someone in to handle mainly the marketing side, the sales and marketing side. It was not something often thought of that could be weaved through the entire organization. I think that's the difference today, is that we're trying to weave it through the entire organization and into the community. Some destinations did it better than others. I think the other part of your question was about what on how students perceive, and I'll leave that to the professor here. But I do think also what we're getting as we hire younger people, they expect it. This is not a trend for them. And you know what the census said, you know, more and more people are declaring themselves as multiple different cultures and different race and ethnicities. So it's an expected, it's no longer a nice to have.
Thank you, Sonya. And what about the education field, Dr. Olson?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm also going to add on that, you know, professionally, before I got into academia, I was working for Disney, and at the time, Disney, I think our industry on one hand was a little more having these conversations, and Disney was without a doubt. And I think, again, kind of their perspective, we welcome guests from everywhere, all walks of life, every single day throughout the year. You know, in terms of education, I'll look at my own educational experience, you know, pursuing a bachelor's degree, you know, a generation ago. No, I don't, these conversations were definitely not happening, or were not incorporated into a curriculum from my perspective. I do think things have definitely changed in the last a decade or so. We are seeing a lot more coursework and discussion in this area. We're also seeing a lot of academic research that's actually being done in this area. Our professional associations, CRIE, all the various federations are starting to having these conversations. So without a doubt, it's been a pretty transformational process, I think, just in the last a decade or so.
And Alyssa, could you add something? Do you have anything to add?
Of course. You know, I think typically hotels have kind of been this, you know, old man's club that kind of run them. And I think that has changed. I look at Sonya Chang, who's the head of Rosewood, and the great things she's doing. So I do think within hospitality, it is changing, but we still need to have these conversations and continue to push it. It's not done yet, and needs more encouraging.
Thank you, Alyssa. Yeah, so I see those change, and the diversity and the inclusion is more visible recently. So that's why our West Federation CRIE has the first ever diversity award. So it's going to be more visible. And I have another questions. What is your advice for our hospitality, tourism, and recreation students to promote a diverse and inclusive environment at work, in the classroom, and also the community? So as a students, what can they do?
I think, you know, we've been working with a lot of colleges recently, and I'm really impressed with the collaborative efforts. I think continuing that and encouraging, you know, these programs. Or I just went to Denver University's hospitality program, and they're doing pop-up restaurants and bringing people in. They have a cook, they have a maitre d', and they're working in these groups to throw on these pop-up restaurants, and all of the thought process and ideas behind it from different students and their perspective. It's just amazing to see. So I would say continuing being collaborative, working, you know, and if you're going to school remote, or trying your best to do that as well. But I think that collaboration and taking advantage of the time in college when you have a diverse pool that you're with, and get to know people, learn from them, challenge your ideas. I studied political science, and if everyone I went to school with believed what I believed, it would never challenge me. It would never cause me to think further and deeper. So challenge yourself, even if sometimes that's hard.
Thank you, Alyssa. And Dr. Olson? Sure,
just a couple thoughts I have. That's a great question. You know, I think you know, students are, if they're able to have access to professional organizations to start having those conversations. I think when students start looking for internships as well as you know, employment, to start having those conversations during the recruitment process, during that interview, I think that's a great opportunity to start, you know, having some of these questions asked. So those are a couple of areas that I would suggest for students as it relates to this topic.
Thank you. And our next question is, I am comfortable with introducing diversity and inclusion topic into our classroom. What is a good way to show a commitment to diversity and inclusion? when meeting people at the conference or the business or reception environments. I want people to know that I'm from the underrepresented groups, but it can sound very forced to bring it up out of nowhere, or is this not important to address? So if I think I am the underrepresented the group, and then is it very important to address who I am or not? Is there any good way for doing this? How do you think?
I took a leadership series on diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm by far no expert, but we talked about allyship a lot, and I think the takeaway for me was, I agree. Don't force it, and actually, you just get in more trouble if you start to force it. I honestly, it's like if you speak to each other as human beings, right? You don't we all do this, right? We all have biases, all of us. It doesn't matter who you are, what your background is. We all have a bias. So the idea really is to have that. If you're having a conversation with someone, have a conversation with someone. And quite frankly, every conversation doesn't have to be heavy. Like, start with the weather. But again, we're human beings first. And that's what we need to do. We start out as human beings. Where you show allyship in action is calling something out if you see something. That's really it. That's the main thing, right? You know what's happening. Or if someone criticizes you for something, it can hurt. And you certainly weren't being intentional about something, but listening and hearing it is a big part of it as well. But I would say, let's just be human, and that's the way that's the way to start.
Thank you, Sonya. And Alyssa, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to, from a recruitment side, if this is something you're passionate about and you want to work for an organization that has these initiatives, I think it's important that you bring it up. And, I think there's a proper way to bring it up in an interview, but if it's something you're passionate about, you want to make sure your organization is represented. Otherwise, 3-4 months down the road with that organization, you're not going to align with your viewpoint. So bringing it up in the beginning would be the best.
Thank you, Alyssa. Okay, and then our next question, I think this is gonna be the last questions. And how can we bring more inclusivity in hospitality business for people with disability? What steps had been taken in past? Are there ongoing major solutions around this issue? As we have seen, many of hotels still do not have a complete understanding of ADA compliance. For example, we still do not have a menu that are accessible for people who are blind and deaf. So is there ongoing solutions for the people with disabilities and ADA understanding of the ongoing initiative for the effort for the understanding ADA compliance in the hotel side or business side or tourism and even education field?
This is a good question. I definitely think that we are trying our best to start leveraging technology to help with this. I think sometimes, especially on the hotel side, some of these historical buildings are very hard financially and physically to change if we have to do major construction, but something that we still need to, this needs to be discussed and addressed moving forward. But I really think we've been trying to leverage technology. I think with, especially with COVID, we've seen the remote positions become available, which kind of open up some opportunity as well, and give some options for people that can't necessarily be in person. So I think remote positions might be an opportunity there, but something we still need to grow and develop and further look into.
Thank you, Alyssa. Dr. Olson?
Sure, a couple thoughts on kind of the educational sense. I wasn't sure if this question is from an educator or a practitioner or a student, but for those instructors that are looking at kind of that environment in a classroom, most universities and colleges have an accessibility department that assists students. So seeking out the resources and expertise and guidance or partnering with that office. At my previous institution, I did that in several of my event management classes, and the office actually arranged panel discussions to kind of hear from event attendees who visited or who went to an event attendees with a disability while going to an event, to kind of hear those personal experiences. I think that could be very powerful. And again, I would also recommend, I think most universities have some sort of centers for teaching excellence. I think that's another great resource as well. Partner or mentorship within a department, another faculty member to talk about some of these ideas. So those are a couple items I would suggest from the educational lens.
Thank you. And then I got the feedback, and the question is from students. Okay. All right, so we are, yeah, Sonya, yeah, go ahead.
You're out of time. I was just going to say, I will tell you that this is becoming a very big topic in the destination marketing organization world. We are, there's a lot more education being done on this. There's a summit I'll be going to, in fact, in June in Orlando. It's called Travelability, and it's specifically around addressing working with people with accessibility issues, because all of us are really in the throes of it. 10 years ago, we weren't so good, but it's a very big topic, and I suspect over the next year and two, you'll see a lot of big changes.
Okay. Thank you all. And we have more questions, but we are running out of time, so I should close. And thank you, panelists, for your sharing your experience with us. And also thank you, participants, for your the participations. And I hope you please enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you all.